Welcome, zombie fans, to this week's episode of Reanimated. I am H.A. Conrad, here with my intrepid friend, Stuart Tiffin. Hello, Stuart.
Hello. How are you today?
Good, good. Do you know we are on episode 65?
I do. This is happening.
This is happening. This episode, like all episodes, is brought to you by Squarespace, the all-in-one platform that makes it easy to create your own website. We use it here. We use it everywhere. They have a bunch of templates for you to personalize it and customize it, and it's very user-friendly. So if you want to try that out and you're a first-time user, we have an offer code, which is zombie. It's not case-sensitive, so throw that in there if you would like to try out Squarespace, and it'll give you 10% off, which is nice. Very nice of our friends at Squarespace. But today we are talking about the usual things, the things in the Z-related news events. And then we are also reviewing episodes 13 and 14 of The Walking Dead Season 3. So I'm actually pretty excited to chat about these episodes, as I always am, but these specific ones, I can't wait to hear some of the things you have to say.
I feel like I'm broken recording a little bit when I say that Season 3 is like just a great freaking season of The Walking Dead. It
is. It definitely is. It did a lot of interesting things with it. So can't wait to talk about that. But before we go there, I guess we should launch into some of the news items that are out there. Now, a friend of the show, Keith, has pointed us in the direction of I Survived a Zombie Apocalypse. And we did talk about this very briefly, but when we talked about it, it's because that this is showing on BBC 3, which was the channel that In the Flesh was on. I'm weeping a little bit here. Can you hear it?
A little bit.
And unfortunately, because I loved In the Flesh so much, this is the show that took its place. And it seems basically like a Survivor / Big Brother reality television show, and it's a game show as well. So they basically have set a premise for the show, which is that the super fast Wi-Fi has somehow infected humans or had side effects on humans, and there's certain different places where quote-unquote survivors are, and the survivors are the contestants of the show. And during the course of the game, they are given different tasks, and they can't allow the infected to touch them. And so I guess they get eliminated as that happens. So
have you actually seen any footage of the show?
I did. And so it feels a little bit more, I mean, all those shows feel very staged to me anyway, but this feels almost a little bit more so, if that makes sense. So they're put there, they know what the premise is, so it's a little bit of let's pretend, and I'm sure it's heavily, heavily edited.
Yeah, this is essentially a LARP setting at this point.
Yeah, yeah.
Because the point of reality TV is to put people in real quote-unquote,
I know.
Believable, real situations. Like, even in Survivor, it's essentially a giant set.
Right.
But at least it's one that we can suspend disbelief that it's an island, right?
Right. So this is not that. I think that that's actually a very accurate description, is that it is a little LARPing. And so one of the pieces that I saw, which I'm imagining must be from the first episode, there's a group that are sort of holed up in this compound, and the last one of them to make it in there is trying to get in. One of them doesn't want to let her in. The others try to let her in, and she eventually gets in. But it's sort of this manufactured drama, which I think all of the reality television shows actually have, but this feels much more like play acting. Yeah. So Keith says that this is a good show. He says he enjoyed it. I also saw other good reviews from other people, but I haven't, and the jury is out until I actually see a whole episode of this, but I'm willing to at least entertain it for one episode. So
I don't remember Keith saying he liked it. I thought he said that it was dumb.
Did he say it was dumb? I thought he said we should check it out, but maybe he said we should check it out because he wanted to hear us tear it apart. I don't know. Keith, weigh in here. So there is that. And then, and this is interesting because there's a lot of sort of Z-related news coming out of London on the entertainment front. And so that leads us to our next news item, which is that there is this, I guess it's an interactive show called Generation Z Apocalypse, and it has already premiered in New Zealand and at the Fringe Festival in Edinburgh. And it, basically, I guess it's an interactive theater experience. So I don't know. I personally enjoyed the comments in the comments section after this article, which is basically everybody thoroughly panning this idea, but they were doing it with a lot of flair. So
yeah, it looks pretty dumb.
Yeah, agreed.
It's more LARPing. I don't understand why this is attractive.
Well, because it's also very expensive.
Yeah,
So,
and honestly, like the reel that they have on YouTube, it looks like they've got some good actors, and I wouldn't mind seeing the movie version of it, but I wouldn't standing there with a bunch of other tourists, like watching actors be actory. But it doesn't matter how close you are to them. I don't know that it would be that immersive.
right. So there is that, and then you also found an article about the best vehicle for surviving the zombie apocalypse on the BBC.
Yeah, and we've already gone over a lot of this, and they do. I mean, the photos are basically Hyundai promotion shots of their various zombie survival cars, which we have talked ad nauseum about. But then, and it's not really a real article either. They're basically just plumbing social media, especially Quora.com, for random people's ideas of what they think a zombie survival vehicle should be. And there aren't too many new ideas here, but I just wanted to point out that this conversation is still going on. And so people go back and forth between the 4x4 off-road version and the armored vehicle, and then just the bicycle, which I think is actually potentially the best idea out there.
Yes, it could be. It could be. And lastly, not from London this time, a friend of mine sent me a clip and was like, had you seen this short film called Super Zero? And I had not, and I feel like somebody had mentioned this to me before, and I am not remembering, so if it was you, let me know, dear listeners. But it is a short film called Super Zero, and it's about 15 minutes long. It's on YouTube. You can watch it there, and from what I understand, it was it's a project with the hope of becoming a series, perhaps, and they were trying to gain enough critical mass for it to maybe be made into like a pilot series or something like that. The director, writer, and everything is Mitchell L. Cohen. And I actually thought that this was pretty well done if you imagine it being a television pilot or a teaser for a television pilot. But that being said, it's retreading sort of some of the same ground, but the production value I thought was pretty good for what it was, and better than a lot of other things that I've seen. And there were some definite good moments within it. But what did you think, Stuart?
I thought it was cool. Yeah, there were some cool ideas with the whole gadget side of things. That was pretty neat. And the cameo by Bobak, the Mohawk guy from NASA, was a nice touch.
Yeah, that was really nice. I was excited about that. So that was cool. I think, compared to a lot of the other ideas for pilots out there, I think that they had some really good lines, some really good premises, the little geek shell inherit the earth kind of theme going on. It definitely had a little bit of a Zombieland feeling to it. Did you get that too? I
mean, all of these things are like you said, retreading the same ground. Retreading, so
yeah.
It's hard not to.
It is, but it was it was fun, and I liked it, so I say people should go and check it out, and give them a little bit of love. So the links will be in the show notes. And I think that brings us to us talking about what I'm really excited to talk about today, which is episode 13 and 14 of The Walking Dead Season 3.
Oh, yeah. So episode 13, if I may, HA, was entitled Arrow on the Doorpost. Was written by David Boyd? I can't remember which order these are in.
I think he is the director and the other folks are the writers.
Yeah. All right. So written by Ryan Coleman and directed by David Boyd. Came out in March 2013 and to an audience of 11.46 million. And the cold open I found confusing.
Yeah, it was kind of strange, right?
Yeah, because it's a total non sequitur. The last episode we watched and the whole audience watched was Clear,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
is, I mean, which is in itself kind of a departure from the story arc, even though they're on a mission, to accomplish a goal in the main story arc. But then suddenly, apparently a lot of stuff has happened that the audience was not privy to. Not a lot, but at least one more meeting, within Andrea in the prison must have happened to set up this sit down, right?
Right, but we don't see that at all.
We don't see
So,
that at all. And so we're like, did I miss an episode? I had to do the double take. And I feel like I remember having to do the double take when I first watched this too. Like, hey, wait a second. Did I not watch last week? Or,
no, and I did the same thing. I actually went back and I thought maybe I had messed up the order we were supposed to be watching them, or I had jumped ahead. I did exactly the same thing. And I'm like, wait, no, this is correct. So, yeah, it does make you feel like something's been cut out. So, you know.
But that leaves so much more time for Rick and the governor to stare at each other across the table.
A lot with
Not talking.
with no verbs happening, no speech. And it's kind of an interesting thing. I mean, they're in the same room together, which is an interesting thing. And then the other folks are outside. And so there's a lot going on in this episode where you have the conversations going on between Rick and the governor, but then you also have the conversations happening between everybody who is not privy to the negotiations.
Yeah, you got Martinez and Daryl bonding, which is just beautiful.
That was actually, to me, that was one of the best parts of the episode is when Daryl, Martinez, and Andrea are going because they hear walkers, and so they're just kind of egging each other on about who's taking out what, and it was a nice little banter happening.
That Andrea quickly bails on when she's like, "Oh God, these guys are just going to be comparing dick sizes."
Pretty much, and But the nice thing about it is that at some point they just let that drop and actually start having a real conversation, which was kind of cool.
Yeah.
I also very much enjoyed the conversations between Herschel and Milton. That was just some of the considering how heavy a lot of these episodes have been, there was levity within this episode in places you didn't necessarily expect it.
Yeah.
So,
I in my notes, I wrote down that their bonding was more awkward, whereas Daryl and Martinez's it felt more real.
Well, it was awkward because Milton's super awkward. He's not somebody that ever even interacted with humans before this happened. Like, he telecommuted, he never talked to other people in person. He's just a weird dude. And so he's sitting there trying to talk to Herschel, and Herschel's being hilarious. Milton's like, wait, show me where you amputated your leg. And Herschel's like, well, aren't you going to buy me a drink first? Like, he's treating it very normally, and Milton's the super awkward part. So I kind of liked that.
Herschel's also not willing to show him his leg because we've already seen him in his crappy duct tape holdout gun, which he's got strapped to his stump anyway. So.
Well, yes, but still, it was humorous and clever and kind of a nice thing going on. So I liked that.
What is not humorous or clever, though, is Andrea, the revelation that Andrea is not trusted by any side in this peace talk that she's brokered, right?
No, she somehow brokered again, folks. Andrea, how is she even? There's no way that she would be, even if the governor was using her for his own, if he has motives for using her, and I guess you can say that. She's a mess. She's like a bull in a china shop. Like, there's just no way you're going to let her get involved to the extent that it seems like they have allowed her to. She's, again, it's this female character that they just seem not to know what to do with, and it's really strange. And so she brokered this conversation and then is all mad because they're going to kick her out of the room. Which, I guess if she actually brokered it, fine, but I just find it hard to believe that she brokered anything.
Yeah, it's a little bit tough to... what I can't believe is that, so after she's gone to the prison the first time, and so she's gone to the prison against the governor's direct wishes, and then comes back and they make up, because then she has the knife to his throat moment. So they have had, like, another moment of intimacy. Their trust, however, is completely shot.
Right.
She is considering killing him that night. And yet, we also have this revelation in this episode that after going to the prison, she has gone back and told the governor about Judith and the fact that Judith might be Shane's daughter. She has divulged serious and like kind of harmful information psychologically to Rick, despite the fact that she has also been considering murdering the man in his sleep. I don't know how I'm supposed to believe that, you know?
Right. No, exactly. Like there's just no there's just no way to come out on any clear understanding of what she's doing, what her motivations are. It's not just that she's scared. It's not that she can't decide. She's just basically changes her colors every 5 seconds. And it's really a weird thing that they've done here with her. And, you know, there was also the revelation when she asks Herschel what happened with Maggie and the governor.
Yeah, oh my God.
And so, okay, so take away everything else that has happened prior to that, like whatever knowledge, whatever sneaking suspicion she might have about the governor. The minute that she realizes that something, because he implies, but it's pretty clear that something bad has happened, and Herschel is telling her that man is like a crazy psychopath, you know, like from Herschel. Nobody else that, like, the person that is probably the most trusted, she's not going to believe that he has any different motivation for telling her anything about the governor, whereas she might not trust whatever Rick says. And she's kind of like, I still can't decide what to do. And it's like, okay, like you can't do that. You know that going back there is not a good idea. Going back to Woodbury, like, what are you doing here? Clearly, you're not a valued person. He's managed to kick you out of the room, and he doesn't value that. And he's just using you for whatever he can. So I just feel like that particular moment is super weird, where she's like, okay, yeah, I'll still go back to Woodbury. What?
It's tough. I honestly, of this episode, all the weird shit about Andrea in this episode, this is the part that I kind of empathize with, and I could see what the writers were doing here a little more than some of the other wishy-washy stuff. So in this conversation with Herschel and Andrea, he's trying to make her feel better because she's obviously upset. And in this conversation, he says to her, "Look, we are family. You belong with us. Right. But if you join us, then it's settled." And it's not entirely clear what he means by "it's settled." But she also nods with like a look of resignation. And I think what he's basically saying is, if you join us, it's going to be war. Like, there is no more peace talks. And so this is me, again, kind of like putting some of my speculation in there. But I think what he's basically saying is, you kind of have to go back to Woodbury in order for any chance of peace to continue to be on the table.
I guess, maybe. But really, are they going to go to war over Andrea?
Because she's the last she's the last bridge between the two communities, you know? Without her.
Maybe, but it's still, I don't know. It still doesn't make sense to me given how she's being treated by both communities. But, okay. I'll give that to you. That does make more sense than what I was...
It's the only thing that makes sense.
I know. And then, you know, outside of this wonderful little cabal going on, we've also got Merle stirring up trouble. And, you know, the interesting thing about Merle is that Merle never doubts what the governor is. He knows full on what the governor is.
Yeah.
And, you know, I understand why people don't trust him, but he's basically like, we just have to take him out now. And tries to get, the interesting thing is he's trying to get Michonne to do that. Is there a sense, or did you have a sense that he was trying to trick Michonne, or maybe he had another side deal going on with the governor, or do you really think he just wants to take the governor out because he's scared of him?
I think he absolutely wants to take him out. I think he's, for the first time, I mean, I believe him when he says stuff like, my brother is out there in harm's way and I can't, I'm not cool with it. I think he's telling the truth, because I think this is kind of a new leaf for Merle. You know, in the past, it's all xenophobia, and when he speaks from a place of like, you know, quote unquote love, whatever that is to him, then I feel like it's for real. And I think Michonne is tempted by his idea to go and do the assassination.
Because she also is very clear-eyed as to what the governor is. So it was just an interesting way of trying to make an ally, I guess, because of all people, these two really don't have any, there's no love lost between them.
Yeah.
But it was just, that was an interesting piece. And then the last piece of it that I think is, this was it was an interesting dynamic to set up with, Rick and the governor staring at each other for long periods of silences. But, part of that, I think, was that they're both trying to size each other up a lot. And Rick is truly one of the things that I thought just watching this episode, it's like, wow, you've just put two of the most unstable people who are both leaders. And that's, of course, the parallels that they're trying to draw between the two characters, I'm sure. You put these two people, one who's seeing visions, one who's clearly like a total psychopath, into the same room together, and they're supposed to be brokering a peace. And, there's a lot of sizing each other up in this episode. And I feel like the good part of their conversations is that you never know what Rick is taking to be truth and what he's not. So he's keeping his judgments about the governor very close to he's trying not to give the governor anything. He's trying to play poker. But even Rick, with the final kind of crazy demand that the governor makes, which is, okay, the only thing I really want is for you to hand over Michonne to me, and then you guys are okay. You'll be scot-free. And Rick tries to just is definitely surprised by this, and is just sort of like, why on earth would somebody like you who has accomplished this much just sort of throw it all away on sort of a petty vengeance? And so that was an interesting dynamic between the two, but it also sets up a lot for the next episode. Yeah. And the next few episodes.
And yeah, definitely. And now this linchpin of whether or not Michonne belongs with Rick's group brings the events of the Clear episode, into more emphasis, which is kind of cool. It's like another reason for why that whole storyline had to happen.
Right.
Yeah.
There was one line that I just wrote down that between the two of them that I really loved. And that was when the governor says to Rick, I thought you were a cop, not a lawyer.
Yeah.
And then Rick says, either way, I don't pretend to be a governor. That was like a nice little burn.
Shot. Everybody keeps giving him shit about his name or his title.
Yep.
Like kind of from the beginning, which is an interesting sort of ideological difference between the prison group and Woodbury people. And nobody in Woodbury seems to question it. Tyrese is willing to call him governor.
Right.
Yeah, so that's kind of a strange thing. With back in the prison with Merle kind of like trying to force the issue and go and just launch his attack on the peace talks. There's kind of a cool moment where even though Merle basically almost always gets his way unless he's overpowered, right? But usually the person overpowering him in the past has been, I don't know, it seemed like more of a battle. In this case, Glenn stands up to him, but then it's actually like a team effort to get Merle to cut out
to basically
his behavior.
talk him down.
Well, and Beth shoots at the ceiling.
Well, that too.
It's not just words, and Maggie puts him in a chokehold.
Right. And then there's also, I mean, there is like the super like weird sex scene between Glenn and Maggie, and it's not like weird because it's it's fine. It's a sex scene in a prison, I suppose, but it's just kind of like, why do you need to take all the clothes off? Because it's like you're gonna be on like a hard prison floor, folks. Sorry.
Yeah.
Just as an aside, totally a tangent, but that's I like that. True. I liked that Glenn couldn't have sex with the zombies watching. That was pretty awesome.
Having sex at all in that situation, yeah, it would be very weird.
Probably weird.
But they needed, this was them also reconciling all the bad blood left over from the torture.
Right, and Glenn does compliment Maggie on her chokehold. That was like their version of foreplay, I suppose. Which is kind of funny.
Yeah. But so eventually the stare down competition ends, and they go back to their respective camps. The Rick and Daryl and Herschel and Martinez and well, Andrea. For a moment there, it looks like she's not sure which way to go and gets in the truck with the governor and Milton. And then when they go back to their respective camps, there's a lot of like some people get the truth, some people get
Right.
a version of it, right?
There's lots of side eye on both sides.
And it's just it's so completely parallel again with this structure where the governor is telling Martinez exactly what he's going to do, which is ambush anybody who goes back to the peace talks that are supposed to happen again in 2 days if they bring Michonne. He's like, just kill everybody except for Michonne, and then her, I want her alive.
And he tells
Rick
Milton that too.
Yeah, but he tells Andrea, like, don't worry, we've got terms. And then when she's like, what are the terms? He just laughs.
Yep.
Like the sketchiest guy ever, whatever. And then back at the prison, Rick is also like saying, he's not telling them that there's a deal on the table to hand over one of them for peace, because he just tells them that it's, we're at war and get ready to die. And when, like eventually he explains to Herschel why he did it that way, and it makes a lot of sense, but it's still very similar.
It is very similar because he's withholding information.
Yeah. And
so, no, there's definitely parallels there. And it does make you, there's certainly a pause there in how things are going to unfold. Like, which side would you really root for?
Yeah.
And if you were actually on the ground there, if you were actually one of the survivors, not in the inner circle of Rick or the governor, at least Rick is sharing with the group to some extent. He's just not sharing all the information, which is the issue. But you'd have to wonder how would the group react to hearing any of this, So this is their leader, so they kind of have to believe what is presented to them.
Yeah.
So I think that just about wraps up this episode, though, right?
That is that's pretty much the last of the significant things that happens.
The one thing I was going to say, the conversation between Daryl and Martinez, the really significant line after they've dropped all the sort of insult making and give each other a grudging respect for their Walker killing prowess. Martinez basically says to Daryl, I don't even know why we're here. They're going to sit there and talk. Eventually, they're going to give the word and we're all going to fight.
Yeah, and Daryl's like, yeah, I know.
Yeah, so they're all in agreement. So it's interesting because you have that dynamic, and these are the people that will eventually have to carry out whatever orders or whatever decision is made, and they already have come to the conclusion that there's not going to be any peace. So the people who are deluding themselves, it's interesting, like Andrea, and even Herschel to some extent, and Milton. They all think that there might be a chance, but the people who are generally the more involved, I don't want to call them the cavalry, but that's kind of what they are. They are the ones that I think have a clearer outlook on how things are going to end up. So,
or they're just more pessimistic about humanity in general.
Maybe. But, so that wraps up that. And then on to the next episode, which is extraordinarily interesting. Unless you have something else to say.
No, that's it.
Yep. So the next episode is called Prey, and not prey as in, prayers. Prey as in hunted. And so this is a very Andrea-focused episode. It was directed by Stefan Schwartz and written by Glenn Mazzara and Evan Riley. And interestingly enough, it aired on March 17th, and it dropped some viewers, which I can only imagine was because people were out celebrating St. Patrick's Day or something like that. But this one it was down to 10.84 million. Still a pretty significant chunk, though. Now, so when I first watched this episode, because of the cold open, I thought that Andrea was probably going to die in the episode. Because usually when they do a flashback or something to show some kind of, I don't know, not heartwarming, but some sort of insight into characters that we don't know a ton about, or that they're trying to get you to feel something for. Usually they do something like this. So the cold open was a flashback to her time with Michonne, which we have not really seen that much of. And they're eating beans around the fire. There's an implication that Michonne knows the walker she's been kind of walking around with, the ones that she had cut their arms off and things like that.
But it's more than an implication. I mean, she basically says, yeah, I knew them, and I don't want to talk about it, and they were dicks, and they deserve everything that happened to them.
Well, no, I mean, Andrea implies, and then Michonne just is like, yeah. So, but it's interesting because they've clearly been traveling for a bit at this point together, so I'd be curious where in the timeline exactly this happened. But it was kind of a weird opening. Did you feel like this was kind of like sort of tacked on?
It doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
It didn't. I mean, that's why I was like, oh, I wonder if somebody's going to die in this episode when I first saw it. And now looking back, I'm just kind of like, okay, that was just kind of an odd addition to the episode.
It sets up like future Michonne specific flashbacks that they do in the show. That those might not even happen until next season, as far as I can remember. But like, she's an interesting character. We do want to learn more about her background, and we get a tiny glimpse of that here, as well as a tiny glimpse of, like you said, just their relationship.
Right, but it was weird. But I was glad it was there anyway, because you do learn a little bit. But this whole episode, to me, just felt like a lot like a horror film. Sort of like the setup and the execution of it. And it, like, the governor at this point, you're not really seeing a ton of sanity from him anymore.
Nah, even when he smiles, it's just with his teeth. Like,
right.
His smiles are this kind of like one of the weirdest, most devilish things in his performance, in a way. But yeah, like his torture room setup scene is weird, and he just starts having like an orgasm while he's pulling on some chains. And
it's really strange.
It's uncomfortable. I'm like, I feel like I shouldn't be seeing this. This is a private moment between the governor and his torture room.
And his chains. And there's interesting things also going on with the Woodbury residents, the people that have been, I mean, Milton has always been loyal to the governor, and he's such an odd character because he keeps showing and telling Andrea things, and it's kind of a weird thing because it's not like he wants to run away himself. So he basically gives up all the information to Andrea about what's going on with the governor, what the governor is planning. He might as well hand her a blueprint of the entire plan. And then when Andrea was like, well, come on, we've got to get out of here, Milton's just like, oh no, I'm going to stay. It's super weird. Did you find it strange?
Yeah, he's the dumbest smart guy in Woodbury, But he feels still this like overwhelming loyalty to this guy called Philip, who I'm pretty sure is dead. Or at least doesn't, live in the governor's body anymore.
Right. And, it's... Well, Milton also was the one who still thought that the walkers were probably going to were still human, and maybe still even thinks that a little bit.
He says he does, even despite the Mr. Coleman experiment, which is crazy.
Right. So, maybe that's going on. I will tell you, the governor's workshop, the torture chamber, just sends chills through me, and part of this is because there's like a speculum sitting right there, and I'm just like, oh my god, what on earth are you gonna do? Like, you are a sick twist, my friend. Just seeing those things set out just gave me the willies. Yep. Which I'm sure is the intention, clearly. But when I say that this particular episode is set up like a horror film, it's set up like a horror film because you're constantly, or maybe if you were alone, or maybe if you're listening to this on headphones as I was, you're kind of talking to the screen and being like, how dumb can you be? Just go. Like, it kind of feels like both Andrea and Milton do a lot of things that are just sort of like very slow moving, and like she tells 10 different people, or she indicates 10 different times that she's going to leave Woodbury before finally trying to leave Woodbury, and doesn't just do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, she's just kind of like wandering around, gets her weapons taken from her, has conversations with Tyrese on the wall, And, Tyrese isn't a small guy. He tries to reason with her. He's like, whatever. And she's like, I just gotta go.
She threatens him with her 2-inch knife blade.
I know. It's just like, come on. Like, what do you think you're doing? So there's that kind of weird dynamic going on where it's basically laying out every single piece of it, which I found a little bit slow moving, but also in line with how annoying I find Andrea. So there's that.
Yeah, and the movie, the horror film motif that you're describing definitely continues in the abandoned factory scene where she keeps the governor arrives and is being really creepy. And I know I'm skipping ahead of some plot, but he arrives and is being creepy and whistling, and she keeps looking a couple of times. She looks towards, and this happens out in the woods too. She's looking at something that she is aware of where it is because of the sound.
Right.
But she's not looking at her immediate environment, which is full of zombies, apparently.
Well, that's
in
the
a couple
other
of
thing.
cases. Yeah.
That's the other thing. The other aspect of this, which felt very horror film to me, is that there's a lot of... Okay, first of all, she knows where the prison is. It's not like she hasn't been there before. I know it's a fair distance off, but she knows enough to know where it is and how to hide and how to do all that stuff. There's an awful lot of ground to cover, but somehow the governor manages to zero in on her in this huge field. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's
at least
many
3 times. He's got LoJack on her. He finds her on that road. Well, he drives by her on that road, which is okay. She escapes, but almost gets eaten. Then he finds her in that middle of that field, which she's an idiot for walking through a giant field.
Well, right.
And then he finds her in that factory, and then he finds her again at the very end of the episode.
Right. Right. How
times.
Yes, it's a lot, right? And so by the time he finally gets her, I was just like, well, I guess take her already, man, because you clearly have her zeroed in upon. It was just the weirdest thing. So, and it was deliberate, I'm sure, but I found it to be supremely frustrating because it just seemed just completely implausible to me. But that's the horror film aspect of this, I suppose.
It's playing up like the part of, I don't know, the superpower version of the governor, I guess. So that makes him more scary to us. The fact that he can not only find someone in the middle of Atlanta backwoods 4 times with, deadly accuracy, but he can also fight off 12 zombies by himself.
Yeah, he definitely, there's some sort of superhuman aspect they've got going on here with him.
Yeah. It gets a little bit bananas. And he's really into torture.
Mm-hmm. Definitely into torture. And he had some pretty good zombie kills, though, in this episode, in the factory.
Yeah, they're mostly gratuitous, but yeah.
Yeah. And then the other part of this episode that we saw sort of woven throughout the storyline is Tyrese's group and Sasha and where they fit in Woodbury. And the nice thing I thought about this is that you have a group of people that have not been fully indoctrinated into Woodbury. I mean, they want to be safe. They think they kind of know what's going on. They think Rick's crazy, but they do want to, I don't want to say assimilate, but the idea is that they want to stay there. That said, Tyrese and to some extent Sasha aren't necessarily taking every order without question.
Yeah.
Because Andrea's given them some intelligence. Basically, he said that the governor's and what he seems. And so,
which is exactly what Michonne told her when they first got there.
I know, which is really funny. So they definitely question things, and they certainly have disagreements with Martinez because he takes them out to see the zombie pits and that kind of thing. And there is dissension within their own group because, like Alan, who's part of their group, whose wife Donna had died, keeps basically saying, stop asking questions, man. Don't mess it up for the rest of us.
I don't like that you give him a name. I just like to call him Douchebag 1 and his son Douchebag 2, and his wife was the Screamer. I prefer these.
Okay.
I don't like to know these people.
All right, we can do it. It's just because he mentions her name 3 times in this episode.
Yeah. They try to get us to know more about the douchebags, and I'm not willing. Because all they do is be douchey, and Tyrese, all he does is be a nice guy.
Yeah, I know. And he's always very even and whatever.
Except for when he's hanging Mr. Douche over the side.
Until the point where you push him over the edge and he's like, all right, I'm just going to dangle you over this pit of walkers. It's okay. So there's that going on too. So at least you do see somebody questioning what's happening. So, and it does feel like the lone person with common sense in the group. So that's going on. And then also within this episode, we saw some burning walkers, which the makeup was interesting on that. So
yeah,
I thought
that was good. Good crispy critters.
I thought they went above and beyond in that. They kind of looked like lava zombies. Yeah. So the idea that they couldn't even stand up because they'd kind of been burnt so much was kind of an interesting thing. And then, it's interesting to me just sort of Milton's behavior, because clearly he's the one who burnt the walkers. He and the governor have some interesting interactions throughout this episode, which at the end, it's not a direct challenge. It's a very passive-aggressive challenge that he makes to the governor.
It's like the worst way to go up against the governor.
Like, I'm like, Milton, dude, what are you doing? You know him. You know him better than anybody. Why are you even talking to him about this?
Do you feel like he knows him better than Merle? I feel like Merle has seen the real flippy side of the governor, and maybe Milton has been spared that. No,
because I think Milton has seen it to some extent, and he's had conversations with him about crazy things. So I just feel like Milton somehow thinks maybe he can control him, or maybe he can talk him out of things, that there is some reasonable person within there. Whereas Merle, it's sort of like takes one to know one kind of thing. And Merle's just like, no, the guy's totally crazy. And we need to take him out.
I just know, Milton has like 5 minutes left to live at the end of this episode.
Oh no, totally. And I'd also like to say, like, they did play the horror film aspect very well with Andrea here. Like at the end of the episode, when she even gets to see the prison, she's like right on the outskirts, and the governor grabs her, and there's this whole like long scene where Rick thinks he sees something, and he uses the scope and all that stuff. So that story arc was well done, even if it was that frustrating horror film, methodology. So I did really enjoy this episode despite some of that. But, part of it's also Andrea's had a lot of chances. And to me, this episode epitomizes how many chances she's had,
Well, she has another chance in this episode to kill him when she and Milton are in the upper
and she doesn't. And she doesn't.
She's about to, maybe not, but Milton stops her. Either way, she could have still taken the shot.
Yep. And she doesn't.
So
again,
it's the third chance. It's only her second, but it's the third chance that somebody's had to kill the governor. I mean, I guess you could count that Rick had a chance to kill him in their peace talks, but I didn't feel like he was going to go through with that. But Michonne had a chance to do it. Andrea's now had 2 chances, and nobody's taken it. And that's so at the end of the episode, when we see Andrea in the torture chair, handcuffed, we're like, part of me is just laughing, honestly. I don't feel bad because, honestly, like you and I have been saying nonstop this season, the writers have almost gone out of their way to make us think that she's a stupid, useless character, and so we're happy to see her in that chair. At least, I don't feel like this. I'm not really conflicted when I say I feel that way. It's like that's how I felt.
I'm not really happy to see anybody in that chair, but I'm not surprised to see her in that chair. What surprised me is that you didn't see Milton in a chair right next to her. Because I kind of thought that's when I first saw this episode, I thought it was going to be like her, and they'd pan around, and Milton would be like strapped to her back. And that both of them would be basically getting their comeuppance for just ignoring all the signals. But that's not happening.
It definitely makes the governor's... when Milton, in the street, right before he does the passive-aggressive thing, when Milton's like, so, is she dead? And the governor's like, I hope not. He's being serious because he wants to torture her.
Yeah, because he's terrifying.
He's such a jerk.
He really is. He's just not a nice person. So yeah, but I mean... These were 2 good episodes. There were a lot of good moments within it. This was such a great season. So I'm really glad that we're getting to talk about it and watch it again.
Hindsight, yeah. It's like I don't think I knew that this season was as good as it was in the moment, and so it's cool to go back and do it again.
I don't think I appreciated it. So,
no. So the next two, we've got two more to go, and that'll round out our reviews of season 3.
Right, and then we've got a lot of exciting stuff coming up in March. iZombie's premiering, so maybe we should chat about that at some point. And you never read the graphic novel, have you?
I have never.
So, maybe we should consider that for a future episode.
Yeah, sounds good. I guess, though, in the meantime, should we wrap this up?
Let's wrap it.
Okay. Well, if do you want to try and tell people how they can get in touch with us?
No, I don't. No. Of course. Okay, no, I'm happy. I'm happy to.
Do it.
So, if you've been watching season 3 of Walking Dead along with us, or you have thoughts about some of these episodes, we'd love to hear what you have to say. You can reach us at on Twitter. Reanimated PCast is our handle, or you can reach out to us. Is it reanimated@gmail.com, Stuart?
Reanimated podcast
at gmail.com. And then our site is reanimatedpodcast.com. So we hope to hear thoughts from you. We've been enjoying seeing some of the listener ideas and things like that. So keep them coming. And then next week we will round out Walking Dead. And at some point we'll eventually be contemporary with the regular show. So that'll be exciting.
Whoa, let's not get ahead of ourselves.
I know. Amazing.
If the podcast overtakes the show like Game of Thrones, the TV show, is overtaking the novels, then it'll be like this thing. And
I think it would be pretty hard for Walking Dead to actually do that.
Yeah. Anyway, there's a lot of zombie well, there's at least one or two other zombie podcasts out there who are live reviewing, like the next day they're doing their review of season 5. I feel like we're probably the only ones who are still
retrospective
back in the trenches, going through exhaustively every old episode of this show. So that's what sets us apart, you guys.
It does set us apart. But I also have to say, just from my the things that we've been talking about, my preference for doing it this way is actually because watching the current season, this reminds me of so many things that I clearly forgot while watching it, just letting the time pass. So I enjoy it. Plus, it's all on Netflix, so binge watching. There you go.
Booyah. Leisurely stroll through archived Walking Dead with the Reanimated podcast.
We know what the listeners want, Stuart. We know what the listeners want. Anyway, until next time, I don't even know what to say. I'll say just ciao.
Alrighty. Catch you guys later.